Just have to stop for a minute with this particular slide. And so this is a gentleman, another veteran, Vietnam veteran, chronic alcoholic. For me, this particular slide really brings home the realities of homelessness. See the word injury? Look under the J and the U. There's kind of like a shiny weird thing under there. You see the shiny weird thing? It's a piece of aluminum foil. And so this is where Bob sleeps at night, by the way, and he calls it his coffin. The piece of aluminum foil is hooked up down here. Do you see the car battery? Right down here? So it's hooked up, it's a light bulb. And he's really, really proud because he really wanted to show me that he's one of the few homeless encampments with electricity. And then there's the bottle of antifreeze over on this side. I don't quite know what that's there for. I don't know, storage, whatever. But I think that picture says a lot. So our brain, what do we do without our brain? We are our brain, aren't we? It does the whole thing, doesn't it? If my brain's not working, not much of me is working. And we kind of forget this. So I'm more or less able to control, most of my behavior, most of the time. But if you give me a good enough bump on certain parts of my head, I no longer can control my behavior. I mean, that's like, let's think about that for a minute. I'm the same person, but I can't control my behavior anymore. And now I become unpredictable. And guess what else? My emotions start going a little crazy. In fact, I might look like a person who has a mental health problem. I might look like I'm depressed, bipolar, or schizophrenic. But I'm not. And then psychiatrists sometimes forget about brain injury, even the best psychiatrists, because it's kind of a weird place in science and medicine. And they sometimes prescribe medications for mental illness that are not appropriate. So, traumatic brain injury. If I go out, and I hope I don't get in a car accident. I really don't want to get in a car accident. But if I did, that could be a life-changing event. So the kind of traumatic brain injury that we often think of most readily is some kind of a blow to the head, right? Or being assaulted or falling down, something like that. There's a more chronic kind of brain injury. If I were a chronic alcoholic, if I used meth, PCP, if I used to sniff glue, paint, those can also result in brain injury. It's a little slower, more insidious. There's also anoxic brain injury. What if I was deprived of oxygen at some point? So that's also going to present some problems and start destroying parts of the brain. The problem with folks that are in the homeless population, and I don't want to say that the homeless and the incarcerated populations are the same, they're not, but there's a lot of similarity. The problem is that some of these injuries occurred when people were very young. There's one case at the prison where someone was actually in a coma when he was 2 years old because he overdosed on alcohol. If you think about that for a minute, how'd that happen? And then how do you even measure what the effects are? And then if that happened, is it possible that mom was drinking when she was pregnant with him? Well, I would say, if you want my bet, I'm betting, yeah, probably was. And what about dad? Because he contributed the sperm, right? And so what we want to do is really raise the awareness that brain injury happens in a lot of different ways, and largely folks that grew up in these very dysfunctional, chaotic, abusive households, if they did get a brain injury, it was never treated. And it might not be documented anywhere. I have guys, they did go through the windshield, and then they were told, you don't need to see a doctor. Suck it up. Because that's the nature of the kind of households that folks grew up in. Highest risk, males. Generally kind of young age males, right? And then we all know what later adolescent males are like, right? Okay, they're off the hook. So they're the ones, they don't need that helmet anymore when they're riding the bike or the snowboard or any other kind of vehicle, right? And then we're goofy enough to actually hand those creatures driver's licenses. They get in fights, don't they? Oh boy, you know, because they got really important things to fight about, you know, when they both like the same girl or something like that. Ooh-wee. Military personnel, I know you're doing the wonderful work with the National Guard, and we have lots of folks coming back from both war zones with traumatic brain injury. Some of those are from blasts. Falls are the biggest reason for the documented brain injuries that we have. By the way, domestic violence was not on the list. So let's just add that onto that list. What happens if we have a traumatic brain injury? Problems with memory and problem solving. Problems managing stress and emotions. So if I can't solve problems, right, I get the brain injury, and then things aren't going quite right for me anymore, like I get late for work, right, because I forgot what time I'm supposed to be there. And so now I'm like more upset than usual, but now I have more problems regulating my emotions. Do you see how it sort of snowballs? Controlling one's temper. And here's where it breaks my heart, because when you're dysregulated and you can no longer control temper, emotions, yada, yada, now you can get yourself in such hot water that you just are not going to get out for a really long time. And this is where we do see the guys that are incarcerated. And I don't think they have to be incarcerated. I'm not saying, you know, let's all go be violent, but if we handle the issue up front, you think we might prevent some of this from happening. Job skills go down. Independent living skills go down. Thinking clearly goes down. Integrating sensory input goes down. That's the phenomenon of my ears are hearing, but my brain is not. My brain can't interpret what I just heard. Emotional troubles, and being at increased risk for other kinds of more serious problems and dementias.